this one is called IPE, and I won't chit-chat too much more about it. I'll let Tamal talk to you about it. But again, drawing figures and making pictures, diagrams, something we all do. So, you know, the better we can do these, the more professional we can make it look, then, you know, the quality of our output is going to increase tremendously. So, please listen to Tamal because you can learn some nice things from him. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. As he introduced, I'm Tamal. I am a PhD student working in Process Systems Engineering Group here in NTNU in Chemical Engineering Department. And my work does involve a lot of simulations, but my work also involves making those results available to people, either through presentations or journal articles or conference articles, and I want to make good figures. So today's presentation is about IPE, a tool I have been extensively using to make those figures. And by these figures, I don't mean the plots, the figures which are only which are not plots. So this is a vector graphic drawing tool, and I have put together some slides and a demonstration for you. So how I got into IPE is first in my agenda. Then I will talk about the background of IPE, some basic features, and certain things that I really like about IPE is that you can really pay attention to some of the details to make precisely what you want. So I will touch upon on that a little bit. I have some examples to show you what you can do in IPE, and finally some advanced features. And these advanced features are not that I'm totally using them, but just good to know what is out there. So how I got into IPE is that I wanted to have a drawing tool that makes nice vector graphic figures. For my presentations and publications, that doesn't use coding. Well, I do use a lot of coding for my simulations, but when it comes to figures, I really want to have this freehand sketching routine that I had when I was a child. So I don't like to make things by coding. So that's the main motivation that I started to use IPE, and it looks like any other drawing tool, which is quite nice. The background of IPE is about so IPE is an open source extensible drawing editor. So this is the place where I should show you how the website looks like. So this is the IPE website. It's open source, and there's some basic features mentioned here, how it has been developed. They have a Facebook page, and the manual you can find here. And they have two versions of the manual. One is this online version where you can find all the things, and they do have another version in PDF document, which I kind of used to make this presentation. If you go here, it has support for Linux, Windows, Mac. I personally am a Mac and a Windows user, so I can say that in both the platform it works nice. So here you have the zip file which you can download, and that's it. That's the IP that you have. Then you have some additional information about IPE and some other downloads which you can see here. But these are not so important. So if you download this zip file, you will end up having something which, and you unzip it, and you will get a folder like this. Here, the good thing about IPE is that you don't even have to install it. It comes installed. You just go into the bin file. There is this IPE.exe. You just double click it, and you have the IPE. So this is how IPE looks. So I will get back to it soon. Let me just go back to my presentation. So it has been developed by Othfried Cheong. He's a professor in South Korea since 2005. He is a computer science guy with a lot of experience in programming. So at least in my experience, I haven't really found any bug in the program. It runs smoothly. As I said, it has an online version of the manual, and it has a PDF version of the manual. I need not show it. And And the nice thing about IP is that the text is LaTeX interpreted. So if you want to include some variables which have to look in math mode, so they will appear in your figure exactly how you would present them in your text in LaTeX. It can produce several different formats, starting from EPS, which is a vector graphic format. It can produce PDFs. It has its own format called IPE, which is an XML format. It can also produce PNG. And the nice thing is that you can export even the figures that you make in IPE into TIX files, which is a text, or it will come out as a text format, and that will include a TIX document. It's very easy to align. The next really nice feature about IP is snapping, which I will be demonstrating later in this presentation. And that makes it very nice to align objects next to each other. Then there are some advanced features called IPE Let, which gives you some added functionality. You can imagine them like plugins in a browser. So you get something extra, but it's not like you can't use it without them. And it has been compiled in for Unix and Windows, and written in C++ and Lua 5.3. So now going to the basic features of IPE. One thing I must first tell you that IPE can read, as I said, many different formats. It can read those formats which are produced in IPE. So if you have made a figure in IPE and saved it as a EPS or a PDF or an IPE formats, you can rework on them later on by just reading them again. But unfortunately, it's not possible to read PDFs and EPS not made in IPE into IPE and then work on them. So that's sort of a disadvantage, but that's how it is. Image files can be also included within IPE. So if you have a PNG file or a JPEG file or any other image file, you can be inserted in IPE, and then you can work on them. I will show you shortly. And one thing that one must know about IPE is that there are 5 different object types. And now it doesn't make sense if I talk about these things without showing you. So I would like to go to IPE. Now the first thing that I want to show you that I have my own version of IPE here, which is right here. And I showed you the other version, which I just downloaded. Now in this version, you see, since it doesn't require any installation, you can have multiple versions of them. And here you see that I have a lot of different options here. Whereas if I go back to the one that I showed you before, it has fewer options. And that's what I meant by this added functionality. There are some extra tools that are available on the website, and you can always go into the files and just copy paste certain things, and then you have a different IPE with added functionality. So let me now just stick to the one that I have here. So first thing I want to show is panning, zooming, and gridding. Now here, this is your canvas on which you can make your figures, just like you have been doing, for example, in Paint. But here, the first thing I want to show is that you have different options to look at your canvas. You can even move the canvas by going here, pan the canvas, and you can move the canvas. You can zoom it. I mean, these are very standard, regular stuff. One thing to note is here you see a grid, and you see a cursor that goes along with it. And this is something, this is a feature of IPE where you have a primary cursor, which is this regular cursor, and then you have this additional cursor, which is the secondary cursor. Now if I go here, I can change the grid size, and then I have a bit finer resolution. So this is about grid, depends on how you want to use it. Now talking about the file formats, here you have, when you make some figures, you have the option to export it as PNG, export as EPS. You can even save as, and then you get option to save it as an IPE or IPE format or a PDF format. You can insert images, and you can then work on them. So that's about importing the different file formats. You can obviously import any file. For example, I have some line here which I made in IPE. For example, let's say I open this windmill. So I made this in IPE, and this was a PDF file, and I just opened it, so it looks like this. And I can, of course, work on this. Now, when I started coming back to IPEs, I wanted to discuss object types. Now, the first object type is is path object, and there we need to understand that everything that we make in a figure includes several different shapes, and these shapes are lines, polygons, and all the different kinds of shapes that you need. They are available here, and the way to use them is just click them and left click, right click, and you have it. But these path objects have specific properties, and those properties you can access just by right clicking them and going to the properties. But here you need to know that when you are in a specific mode, like right now I'm in this rectangular mode, so if I want to do something, it will not let me because it's in that mode. So I have to first go into the select mode, then I can do what I want. If I want to delete these, I can delete them, and then I can work with the different properties. Here I have 3 different options. One is the stroke only, which will make only the stroke, which is the boundary. I can have stroke and fill, then it will also fill inside, and I can have only fill, then it will just, so let me show you the stroke and fill. So here it has a different color at the background, and you can choose the colors either right clicking here, you have all the options, and also you have the options here, some of them here. So if I go here and make, for example, I would like to show the pen width. Now you have 4 different options, so if I make the pen width a bit larger, you see it a bit more clear. I can change the fill color to this, and then, so these are the very basic properties. You can also make dashed lines, and you can make tiling. You can change the opacity, so if you can reduce it, so it will become or slightly transparent. So these are very basic properties which are kind of, we are familiar with all other drawing tools. Now we have also some extra thing called a marker, which is kind of nice to have when you want to just place different points or show something in the figure. One thing you need to know about path objects is that there are 2 kinds of path objects. So I'll just get rid of this. We have 2 kinds of path objects. One is called open path, and one is called closed path. So if you see here, I just activated the line, and with line, if I just left click, left click, left click, and left click, it looks like a triangle, but it is not a closed object because I drew it like just dragging it around. The another way to make it is to use the polygon, which I selected now, and I can make the same thing or similar thing, left click, and right click, and I have a triangle. But these 2 objects are different. Let me just make them a bit darker so that you have. So the only thing you need to understand is that a closed object is different from a path object, and the way I want to show it is there is something called arrows. So if I go and select this one, and here you have the option to place an arrow at the back and arrow at the front. Now you see that it shows some arrows here. Why? Because it's a open path object. If I do the same thing on this one, it doesn't show anything. So this is a property of only open paths which can have this thing. Then I want to show you a second feature called compose path. So compose path could be used when you want to, let's say, make 2 concentric circles. So I would like to make one of these and the other of these, and I want to just fill the internal part. which is actually not quite hard. You can actually color the outer one and then place another colored one inside. But just in case you want to have only that part, then you can compose the path. Then it recognizes this whole thing as the surface and the internal part here as the fill. So if I just go here and fill this stroke, and I make it stroke and fill, and I can just choose the fill color. So then you will see it that this is how it works. So this is the property called composed path. Now I would like to show some of the other features like translate and deform. So this is the translate option. You can just grab anything and move it. But if you hold the shift key, then it will make sure that you only move in the vertical and horizontal direction. It is kind of nice to have when you want to align something against each other. Now I would like to show you another feature called stretching. You can obviously stretch this as you want, and if you hold the shift button, then it will make sure that you stretch while keeping the aspect ratio same, and so on. So now I come to the kind of the most important feature of IPE, which is the snapping. Now snapping makes life really easy when you want to align objects against each other. So one thing is to bring different objects which are here, like different shapes, into the canvas. But then that's not all. We want to connect them. We want to make something with respect to each other. So what snapping does, it gives you this freedom to choose many different possibilities. So here you see these are all the snapping options that I have here. Now right now the snap to grid is activated. So what you see here is that I'm allowed to move only in the snap or in the grid points. So if I take this point and want to draw something from here to here, it will only be stuck to the grid points, which is good if you want to be aligned with the grid points. But if you want if you don't want to be with the grid points, you can obviously turn this off, and then you have access to all the points on the canvas. Now there are several different snapping modes. Some of them which I really like is the vertex, snap to vertex. Now let's say I want to make I keep the grid turned on so that I have access to the points, but you see that I will get some additional points here, for example, which let me hook this one to, let's say for this, if I want to connect these 2 points, which is quite easy. I have right now, so if I just wanted to connect these 2 points, it was kind of easy to do that, just because I had this snap to vertex tool. So it just gives me exactly that point, and if I'm in the neighborhood of that point, then it will just drag me to that point. So this is about vertex. Now I want to show something, another feature called snap to edge. So let's say I make a circle. So I made a circle, and if I go here, and I don't know the center of the circle, so first I would like to snap to control, and what it does is it gives you the center point of all these objects. So here you see that this line had this as the center point, this line had this as the center point, this line has, and so on. And here I get, on a circle I get the center. So I would like to make, let's say, a marker here to highlight that this is the center. So this snapping mode gives me the control point or the center of the object. Let's say I now show you the next snapping mode, which is the snap to boundary. If I turn this on, then I will have access to all the points on this. Let me say I turn the snap to grid off, then I have access to all the points on these, which is nice to have if you, let's say, want to just precisely want to make a line that touches the circle and goes to this point. So then you can just grab one point here, and So these snapping modes are kind of the guiding lines that helps you precisely draw exactly what you want to draw. And the last snapping mode that I have here is angular snap, which is kind of my favorite. What angular snap does is you can go to any point. Let's say I want to be here, and if I press F1, it will make this as the center of this canvas. Now if I do that, then let's say I wanted to move this whole thing exactly 60 degrees in one direction, keeping this as the center, then I can always do that. I can just select this part, and there is a short key called Control R. So if I go here and say 60 degrees, it will precisely make this move exactly, keeping this as the center. So this is also something which I like. You can obviously go back to this snap and hide the axes, and you can turn off the angular snap. This is the one here you have, angular snap. The second interesting feature is that within angular snap, you can select the center with F1, go to the point which you want to make the center, and just press F1. And let's say now you're allowed to only move on these specific angles. You can make them finer by choosing finer angles. But let's say we stick to 45 degrees. And we have these options, and then let's say I instead want this, at this point I want this line. So then I can just press F2, then it will make this as the direction. So F1 is the way to choose the center, and F2 is the way to choose the direction. And the last one more option which I like is for example, I want to draw a tangent to this circle, which is not quite trivial if you think of it. So I would turn on the boundary snapping, so it lets me access all the boundary points, and then I press F3, it will precisely make a tangent at this point. So now if I want to make a normal, I can just grab this here, and if I want to make a tangent, so these are kind of things that makes it somewhat easy to work what you want to do. So this kind of concludes the part of snapping, and now I would like to show that you have some other options like grouping some different things together and then working with them. So these are like regular things that you also get in other drawing tools. But one thing I really like about IPE is that you have the freedom to precisely do things. Like for example, when I rotated this thing, you can go in this IPE Let. In the goodies, you have some precise options like precise rotate, precise stretch. So if you want to make a stretched object of the same thing precisely twice as the size which was existing. So these are the options that you have, which make it quite easy to make what you want to do. Then you have the order of the objects, so you can obviously place them on top of each other or relative to each other. Choosing here, first you need to select the object, for example this one, and if I have only these kind of objects, I won't be able to show that, so let me just get rid of this. So let's say I make this, and I make one of this and one of this. One thing you need to know that you need to always keep within the canvas. So if I make a figure out of it, it will only show the part that is on the canvas. So now let's say I just color them, make pen width as flat, ultra fat, pen width ultra fat. And I just color them here, one as white, and one as the other way to do is to just select it, and you can also choose it here. So I make it dark gray and just go here and choose, make it dark orange. So now I can obviously align them. So if I want to make this orange circle go, orange disk go all the way back, I can make, either I can make backward, then it just goes one side, one object back, or I can make it all the way back, then it will just go back, then it's completely at the back. So you have these functionalities that you can choose to order. It's because you have the select mode. I mean, now it looks like how you want it. Yeah. Now I would like to tell you about the text modes. The text mode is one of the objects which is also very nice. So here you have 3 different text mode. You have a text label, which is like regular text. If you can go here, you can enter your LaTeX code. So if you say that this is IPE, and then you want to include some mathematical terms like, I don't know, omega, then you can include exactly how you include it in your LaTeX. And let's say, for example, I make it large or even huge. So then it will appear. So rest of the things are like in regular text, and this is math mode. Then you have the other option to just choose mathematical symbols. Then you can select this one, and then you have already the math mode activated. So you can directly write omega, and you don't even need to put the dollar signs that you do. It's quite tiny, but yeah. And then the last option is the paragraph. So you can even choose the width. So these are the 3 different options. But one thing I want to show is that if you want to turn or rotate using the rotate option, it won't rotate because the texts are not like regular path objects. So if you want to rotate it precisely 90 degrees to align it with an axis, for example, then what you can do is go to properties, and there is this thing called transformable text. You can turn this on, and let's say I just say Control R and make it 90 degrees, so it will precisely align it 90 degrees. Other options that you have is, as you can see in IPE, you are limited to certain colors. You have a defined palette of colors, and you can't choose anything outside that. But since it's a LaTeX interpreted, you can obviously always select your object and define your own color. So I say text color here, and you can define the RGB code. And let's say I choose 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. Then it will obviously choose that color for you. I think the color changed, but it was very similar. So but you can see that it's not the same as this one. So and one more nice feature is here that you can change the document properties. And if you remember, when in LaTeX documents you have a preamble where you define all the packages and all the things that you want that document to hold, you can do that here too. And for those of you who really want your figures to have the same font as your publication or the text that is in the publication, then you can always choose it here. You can define like exactly how you do it in. You can use package, and let's say I define a different font. So I do Courier. And right now it's Helvetica, so it should change, but sometimes it takes time to do that. The other way to do it is to do Control L. So did it do anything? Didn't look like. Sometimes it doesn't work, but ideally speaking, there is a automatically run LaTeX activated. Sometimes it takes time to get activated. But the idea is that you have these options, and you can always okay, let me try one more. Okay, so now it did. So it can recognize the LaTeX preambles, which is also a very nice feature.
Tamal, in that properties toolbar, does that define like default objects? So if you set it to align with the ultrafat?
Yes, you can. Yes, that's a nice thing. You can always choose here, for example. Yes, so you can choose here ultra. You can always choose here ultra fat. So these are like predefined. So if you select any object, so it will always draw it in ultra fat. But these properties are somewhat limited, and you get a bit more properties when you choose them otherwise. You can always include images. You can include images. So let's say I insert an image, and I have an image of NTNU Health. And sometimes when you want to make some figures, what happens is you encounter a nice figure in one of your publications, and you just want to copy paste that into your master thesis or but you feel bad about it because it looks bad. It is not vector graphic. But here, let's say this was your figure and you wanted to make exactly like this. So here you have an option called layers. You can choose a new layer here. As you see that here it shows the number of layers you have here, and this yellow thing that you see is kind of the activation. So if I draw something, it will make on this layer. But if I want to make on the other layer, so I will just have to double click on that one and make both of them visible. So if I have checked both the boxes, then both of them are visible. And then I can just like grab a spline, for example, and just go over it exactly how I want. I'm doing it in a very abrupt way, but just to give you an idea. And then if you take this first layer away, so you have kind of a shape. You need to do it a bit more properly, and you can obviously go back and select edit path. So this will give you a bit more clarity exactly how you want them to be. Of course, with the thing on, so you clearly know what you want. So you can place them as you want, and then make a mirror image of it, and then you can exactly align them. So let's say I am happy with this. I say accept. So this looks like half a heart, and I can just select it and go to the IPE Let. There you have an option of mirror horizontal, so it will make exactly like this. You can copy paste, and then you can connect these two, and then you have the heart. So this is just to say, like, if you have a figure that you really liked and you don't want to just copy paste it, you can recreate it using the splines option here. And one thing that I would like to mention here is that when you are exporting PNG documents from IPE, the thing that I have noticed is, out of experience, I don't know why that happens, is you need to make sure that you always plot or always make these things at the highest possible point. So let's say you want to just have these two lines. You plot them as high as possible, and then you choose the highest grid possible, and then you save it as PNG. Here in select, you can always save it as EPS, but for example, if you want to include them in your PowerPoint document, then you need PNG files, and you can save them like this, and then it looks slightly better compared to if it was placed somewhere below. So, and if you have Mac, then in Mac there is a software, or their default PDF viewer is called Preview. And in Preview, you get the option to import an EPS and export PNG with predefined DPI. So you can choose the dots per index, so it precisely makes how high resolution you want. So now I will go back to my presentation, and I will show you, as I already told you about paying attention to detail. So that's what I meant, that you have many options where you can precisely draw figures with precise rotation, precise translation, precise stretching, smoothed edges. This I would like to show, smoothed vertices and arrows. Yeah, smooth vertices and arrows. So let's say I would like to make a line from here to here, and I would like to make a spline, but before that I would like to activate the edges, the vertices, so that I have access to them. And I want to connect, for example, this one to this one. Now if you go here, you see that they look good, but there is this slight little edge. You can select both of them. First I need to go to the select mode, shift, selected. I can join the path, then they are joined. Then it's like now it has become a closed path. Now it's a composition of two open paths, but now it's a closed path. Let me see. So this one also worked, but sometimes it's a bit rough around those vertex, but you can always go here and change the line cap to round, and then it makes nice and smooth round. And one more thing I would like to show is, if you have, for example, an arc that goes from here to here, and I have, if you want to have an arrow here, so this arrow is not center aligned, but you can change the arrow shape, forward arrow shape, and if you choose F arc, it kind of makes it center aligned. So these are like tiny little details that make things look very nice. So I actually would like to now show some of the figures that I have managed to make on IPE, and some very nice simple figures which are not too hard. And this is like 3 different layers of vessel, 3 layers of fluid in a vessel. It's not a very difficult thing to draw. It's just you have to make the edges and then fill them with different colors, and but yeah, it might be difficult. I can show if I have time. You can even make animations. So I try to make a simple animation using IPE. I tried to recreate the South African flag by just taking one from the internet and making my layer and just drawing on top of it. So, and then I made this symbol of a flower, which I could do because I had this access to this precise rotation, so I could make it and then turn it, I don't know, 15 degrees at a time, and then I had all the petals. So yeah, so this is what I did, but I would like to show something on IPE. So how I actually managed to draw these 3 different layers, for example. So let's say I go into a bit of a grid, and then first I would need to draw an arc. So I draw an arc. It's good to have the ultra fat. Let's not have the arrows. And I would also like to have the grids on so that I have access to the grids. So then I draw it from here to here. Now what I need to do first is to deform this object, because it doesn't look exactly like a semicircle. So I would like to deform this object. So let's say I stretch this object a bit, and I make a copy of it. So now I have 2 of those, one on top of each other, and I go here and use this vertical, mirror horizontal. So it makes 2 of those, and I can just hold them and drag them using the shift so it doesn't move. And then I just connect them, having access to these vertices with the vertex snapping turned on. So I just connect these two, connect these two. So it looks like my figure, but I would like, before I make any changes, I would just like to have a copy of it and move it down. And now I would like to first go here and select all these and join the paths. So now this is like a single closed object. So if I want to make, let's say I want to have a background color of white, so it is white, which is kind of like the topmost layer, which is like the gas. Then I want to make, I would like to first also make sure that this has no, so this is only a fill only object, because then at the end I can just pull this on top of it, so it would look like the vessel is complete. So this is my first object. The next object I would like to work with is, I'll make a copy of it, so I have one more. And now I would like to just change the color of this object to, let's say, green. And I can just go here and edit the path, and I would like to turn on the edges, snap to boundary. So if I move this point here, it will let me move only on the circle. So let's say I choose these 2 points, and let's say this is, yeah, I'm happy with this, so I accept it. So it has already made a different layer. Now if you wanted like this to be a curvy layer, you had to make this line using a spline. One could do that, it's not too hard. I can just say, one could actually start with a spline, and then you will have much nicer looking. And similarly, you can just make one more layer and edit and make a different color. Let's say this time I choose blue, and I may edit the path. I just change the points again, and I'm happy with it. I accept it. So now you have 3 different layers. They are like very, very smooth. It's not like how I showed in my figure, because I chose the splines, so they had a bit more curvature. But now I just take them together, hold the shift key, so it just, I'm in the select mode, so I just select it, go to the translate object, hold the shift key, and move it on top of it. So it's kind of made. And if you export it, I would like to save it as a PDF. So I choose PDF here, go to desktop, and I save it as layers and save it. So there it is, and it looks like this, and it can easily be saved in EPS, and then it can easily go into your, either in the EPS or in the PDF format, it can go into your LaTeX document. So this was one of those. I would also like to show how I made this windmill animation. So those of you who think like making animations is a very hard thing and it is only possible if you know a lot of coding, well, it's actually not untrue, because if you know coding, then you can make animations look much more nicer. But if you don't know coding and you just want to make it in IPE, you can still make some simple animations, the one that I made. So I would like to show how I made that one. So let me go to this one. As you can see, I have several different layers here, and those layers function as my frames, which will, as I show you all the frames, they look like this. So they are essentially one moved at a time with a specific angle. So I made the background, which is this mast, and I made one of the wheels, and then I rotated them one at a time and also changed the way it looks. This one turns a bit, this one moves. If you can see the difference, especially here with 2 of these turned on. And these are the different layers, so you can make several different layers with different objects and stuff. And here in views, you have several different options. You can make many different views. So like here, you can obviously introduce a new view and combine several different layers in that view. So if I go here, I have access to all the views. So these are my views. As you can see, this one starts here, then it rotates a bit, and so on. And these wind directions are also like up and down and so on. So if I choose, for example, view 2, so view 2 contains only beta as my layer. If I go instead to view 3, then it contains gamma as my layer. So that is the only thing activated in there. So this, what it does, it makes several different views, and that's how you essentially make an animation. You have a few figures which go as different frames. So when you would export this kind of a file as a PDF, it will make a PDF that would look like no, this one is already animating. So this one, it should look something like this. This is the first page. This is the second page. I mean, this is, I made something extra in this one. So these are the several different pages, and they will form as different frames in your animation, and they will just run in a loop, and then it will look like an animation. And to make it in an animation is not very hard. You can just use the animate package here and use the graphics package, and then you can easily put it in the animate graphics. You have the number of frames per second. So here I choose, like, for example, 10, and this rotating windmill is the name of the PDF file which has all these pages, and here you choose the number of pages, starting pages and the ending pages. So I actually made one in the morning where I try to make a pendulum which rotates. So I compiled that one here, and it just made that one. So let me go. So this is like a simple pendulum rotation. So I made several different views, and they are now played together in a loop. And I can probably show you the PDF file that resulted from this without the rotation. So this has several different layers or several different frames as different pages, and they just play on top of each other or in a loop. So this is about the animation that I had here. And this flower is also not very hard to make. You have to first make the petal and then just rotate it precisely several different times so that it looks like a flower. So that's about the basic features and the examples. Now I would like to talk in the time remaining about something which I call the advanced features. I don't really use them so much, but they are nice to have because they give you some added functionality. In IPE, it has been written in Lua, so you can always include some Lua code, and that will give you some added functionality. More about this you can read on the website, and they call it IPE Lets. If you go into the IPE GUI, you have these IPE Lets, and they show up here. And one nice thing is that this TIX export. Let's say you have a TIX document where you have some other figures which you want to combine with something that you made in IPE, which is also possible. So you can just go into the IPE Lets, and here I have this TIX export. You can export to the file, and then it will make a TeX document. But the only thing is that the TeX, when you make a TeX document out of IPE, and when you try to compile it in LaTeX, it doesn't directly compile because it doesn't know the colors and different things that you have used within IPE. But when you read the documentation of this specific IPE Let, which is the TIX export, you can have you need to have an extra package which they have provided, and you need to include that in your LaTeX document to make it work with LaTeX. An added function here, so in IPE Let you can have many different options. Like for example, here I have a plot option. So if I know the function of something that I want to draw, I can draw a coordinate system. I first need to make the place where I want to plot something, and I go here and define a coordinate system. I don't want to show it here, but you can just make, like for example, a sine function or whatever. That is also possible. And I would like to show how to make these IPE Lets work. So as you can see, in my regular version, the one that I was showing, it doesn't have this added option. At least the TIX export is not existing here. Whereas in mine, I have that one. Now the difference is that the way I started IPE was using this extracted file from this zip folder, and here inside you have this bin from where we found the IPE, but you also have this IPE Lets, and here you can combine and put all these things. For example, if I take this one away, which is the Voronoi diagram, if I take this away, then you will see that this probably disappears. Maybe not right now, but if I restart it, it will disappear. So with an IPE Let, so as you can see that this Voronoi diagram used to be something here, that is gone. And so similar way, you can just copy paste the Lua program and paste into that folder, and then it will start to appear here. So this gives you some added functionality. You get it on the website. So yeah. And the last thing I want to talk about is the style sheet. So as you can say that in IPE you are limited to this specific canvas length and specific colors, but there is something that goes behind it, which I would also like to show within here. So here you see within the IPE folder you have something called styles. Now these are the basic styles which appear on the IPE GUI. It is possible to change these things here. Then you are getting into somewhat coding domain. You need to do something, and there is some support on the website about this. So if you make some changes and you want to include extra colors, or you just want to do some changes the way it looks, you want to make the canvas to look in portrait and in landscape, or whichever it is, or you want to change something, that is also possible if you work with this file and make a new one, and then you will have access to that one. So these are called style sheets, but that is getting into some advanced features of this which I have never explored, but there is actively work going on these on this. So with this I would like to conclude the talk, and if you have any questions I would be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Tamal. Are there any questions from the audience on this? Yes.
I want to know if the IPE can have some self-contained library. For example, I commonly use Microsoft Visual, and they have some pumps, reactors, and something like that.
What do they have?
Some built-in library for some reactors, so I don't need to join it myself.
You can maybe look into the website. Maybe someone has put up some libraries, but you can always make your own libraries and use them again and again. I'm not aware of these libraries within IPE because I just always make my new, but you can always use something. I'm not aware of this.
Any others? No, I think it was very straightforward, Tamal. It was very good lecture.
Excellent.
And with that, I want to thank everybody for coming out and invite you to help yourself to some pizza and refreshments at the back. And I hope we can see you all again next semester. So thanks a lot.